Hey guys, Mr. Gucci here with your Unit 6.1 help video. Let's get to it. I'm gonna put my guy up here. Hey, here's my face. Okay, cool. So we're starting with the basics, ions and charges. Okay, so we started off with some ion talk in the last unit, the beginning of the last unit. Let's review the essentials. Okay, so an ion is any atom that gains or loses electrons and is no longer neutral. So, for example, atoms that lose electrons are metals. Metals give up their outermost electrons. And as a result, they end up with more protons than they have electrons. And if you have more protons than electrons, you are positive. So metals form positive ions because they give up electrons. We call these positive ions cation ions because cats are meow positive. All right. Atoms that gain electrons, these are nonmetals, okay? They steal electrons to complete their outermost energy level, okay? And as a result, they have more electrons than they do protons. They are negative ions. And we call these negative ions anions. So once again, metals are positive ions called cations. Nonmetals form negative ions called anions. Cats are positive, ants are negative, all right? Cations are positive, okay? Now, all atoms want to have 8 outermost electrons. This is why metals and nonmetals will give up or steal electrons respectively, all right? This is what ionic bonding is all about. If you get metals and nonmetals together, the metal will give up electrons in order to get an octet, and the nonmetal will steal electrons in order to get an octet. Here's a little GIF that does not appear to be running. Ah, here it is. Cool. Okay, it's running. Cool, 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 cool. All right, so we see sodium right here has one outermost electron, which it gives up to this fluorine. The fluorine wants one. The sodium wants to get rid of one. All right, it's a match made in heaven. So the sodium loses an electron. Then they become charged ions. One's positive, one's negative, and then they stick together because of their opposite charges. This is ionic bonding in a nutshell. Now, because atoms are trying to get an octet, they all want a certain number of electrons to get their octet. For example, the noble gases, the elements on the far, far right of the periodic table, they already have 8 valence electrons, so they're not going to steal any. They're not going to ionic bond at all because they are content with the electrons that they have. But fluorine and chlorine, they both have 7 valence electrons, as does beneath it bromine and iodine, okay? And so because they have 7 valence electrons, they will need to steal 1. Okay, so fluorine and chlorine will get a -1 charge when they form ions because they have to steal 1 electron to get an octet. Oxygen and sulfur have 6 electrons on the outside, which means they need to steal 2 more to get an octet, and that's what they do. So oxygen and sulfur, as well as selenium down here, which you can't see, will steal 2 electrons. Anything in that column, the same column as oxygen, as an ion, always has a -2 charge because it's always stealing 2 electrons. Nitrogen and phosphorus, these guys have 5 valence electrons. They have to steal 3. So these guys will always get a 3- charge. Lastly, carbon, the last nonmetal, it has 4 valence electrons. So in order to get 8, it will steal 4 more and get a -4 charge. Now, metals, nonmetals again, are stealing electrons to get an octet. On the left here, you'll see some metals: lithium, sodium, beryllium, magnesium, aluminum. In order to get an octet, these guys would have to steal a lot of electrons. It's too much of a hassle. What they do instead is they get rid of their electrons, and that makes them positive ions. All right, they get rid of electrons, and that makes them positive ions. So again, nonmetals stealing electrons, metals giving those electrons up. Okay? These together are the monoatomic ions. These are all these ions that are made of just one charged atom that either gained electrons by stealing them or lost electrons by giving them up to another atom. These are monoatomic ions, literally ions made of a single charged atom. You might be like, well, isn't that all ions? Right? No, we'll learn about some other types of ions called polyatomics. They're basically molecules that have a charge and act as an ion, okay? One thing to remember with these ions is that you write the charge on the upper right of the atomic symbol, right? Write it small. If you're typing it out, you would use what's called superscript, which literally just means above writing, Latin. Fantastic. Okay. So calcium, which is 2 plus, you would do a calcium symbol, and then a 2, and then a plus up above. Nitride, which is a negative nitrogen ion, is, well, it's a nitrogen symbol, and then it's a 3 minus charge up above. Then you have chloride. Okay. Chloride has a 1 minus charge. Now, if you have a 1 minus or 1 plus charge, you can just write a minus or a plus. You don't have to put a 1. How, like in algebra, if the answer is 1x, you can just write x. Okay, cool. Now, let's go briefly over some of these ions. Okay, nonmetals form negative ions. Okay, they steal electrons from metals. This is what makes them negative. And they steal however many electrons they need to get an octet. Okay? And when they steal electrons, when they become ions, we no longer refer to them by their normal atom name or element name. We give them an "ide" ending. So, for example, fluorine, let's take a look here. Let's take a look, okay? So, group 17, all these guys, they all form -1 ions because they all just need to steal 1 electron. So fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine will all steal electrons given the chance, and they become fluoride, chloride, bromide, or iodide with a -1 charge. All right. Group 16, oxygen, sulfur, and selenium. All these guys need to steal 2 electrons. They will all get a 2 minus charge, and they become oxide, sulfide, and selenide. All right. Nitrogen and phosphorus, these guys will steal 3 electrons, and they will become -3 ions. For example, phosphide or nitride. Carbon is the only atom, the only nonmetal, that will form a -4 ion. It will steal 4 and become a 4 minus ion. All right, called the carbide. That's the only one. Okay, so let's take a look here. Let's try and fill this out. All right, now we did this in class, but let me show you how this works. Okay, so fluorine becomes fluoride and has a -1 charge. All right, oxygen becomes, oopsie, are we writing here? Are we writing what? I'll write here, okay? Oxygen becomes, we drawing? Can I draw? Oxygen becomes oxide, and its symbol is O2 minus. Okay, there it is right here in this column. All right, O2 minus. Okay, nitrogen, here it is right here, becomes nitride. Its symbol is N3 minus. Okay, iodine, here it is right here in this column, it becomes iodide. It is I1 minus. Selenium, this guy right here, same column as oxygen, so it is selenide. It forms a 2 minus ion as it steals 2 electrons to get an octet. Finally, carbon right here. This ion is carbide. It is C4 minus. It steals 4 electrons. Okay, I'm going to pause this video here, and then we'll finish up with the other elements in another video. All right, cool.